All right. Yes, the summer schedule of speakers is listed on the webpage, starting May 26th with a presentation from Gary McGraw, and then moving on into a number of other speakers. So you can check that out. And if you are a student enrolled here in the fall, this course will again be offered in the fall, pass, no pass. Even if you've taken it this semester, you can take it again because we're going to have different speakers. So feel free to sign up for that if you'd like. So today, to close out, we're going to a different continent. Our speaker is Professor Steve Furnell, and Steve is a professor of cybersecurity at the University of Nottingham in the United Kingdom. He also has appointments, courtesy or adjunct appointments in Australia and South Africa. So he actually, in a sense, is spanning 4 continents as he speaks to us today. Steve has been working in the area of cybersecurity in a number of different aspects, including usability, management, intrusion detection, and many of the areas actually similar to what I've been working in during my career. So we've encountered each other a few times. And also of note, an organization that's not as well known in the US is IFIP, the International Federation of Information Processing Societies. This is a multinational organization that national computing organizations can be members of, and individual researchers can join the technical committees. Technical Committee 11 is the one on basically cybersecurity, privacy, and related topics. And Steve happens to be the current chair of IFIP-TC 11. So I think I've probably covered most of the high spots, although not quite all. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Steve so he can tell us about whether we can recognize cybersecurity skills. So Steve, thank you for being here.
Thanks very much indeed for the opportunity. Delighted to be here, and hopefully the internet connectivity will hold up long enough for me to actually deliver the talk. I'm getting a few jitters on my side. I think it's my internet, but let's see how we go. So let's start off by hopefully sharing the screen. So hopefully now you can see some slides there. So yeah, the topic of the talk, as Spaff has kindly mentioned, all about cybersecurity skills. And basically, yeah, we know we need them, but do we know what we're looking for? Do we know what they look like when we're trying to find them? That's the basic premise of this talk. Okay, so a bit of a outline for you to give some sense of structure. We'll see how it goes as we get through it. But to begin by setting the scene, talking about something you may have heard of already, this cybersecurity.
We appear to have had a glitch there in the networking. So please stand by, and I'm sure we'll get Steve back as soon as we can. Oh, we lost him. I'm sure he'll dial back in here or connect back in. That's the one thing that doesn't happen with in-person talks. We don't get people to freeze up in the middle of what they're saying. Oh, he's coming back.
Right.
Welcome back, Steve.
Hello. Can you still hear me now?
Yes. You put up the first slide, started in, and then we lost you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, it dropped out for me. So let's go back to the content slide then. Let's start again from here. Right, I've tried a different bit of internet connectivity now, so let's see how this holds up. So, aim of the session, talking about the cybersecurity skills gap, the fact that there is a notable demand for cybersecurity skills in the market, but then moving on to think about, well, what does this mean in terms of actually how we define and recognize cybersecurity? Because in actual fact, there are a number of frameworks out there that define it cut the cake in rather different ways. And that then goes on to inform how we recognize qualifications and certifications in the area. That then in its turn leads through to, okay, there's all these things out there that an individual could be pursuing, could hold as things on their resume, but what do we actually see being more in demand perhaps than some other things? We'll look at that, and then we'll draw things to a close, and hopefully internet connectivity will hold up through the rest of it. So just a little bit more scene setting about me. Spaff said quite a bit of this already, so just to give a little bit of context, yes, I'm a professor of cybersecurity at the University of Nottingham, written quite a number of papers in the topic area over the years. Some of them people have even read. I'm the editor of something called Information and Computer Security, which is one of the journals particularly addressing the business, organizational and human aspects of security. I'm a board member of something called the Chartered Institute of Information Security. That's a professional body particularly interested in professionalism and skills in the cybersecurity arena. So it's sort of relevant to the context of this talk. And as was mentioned, I'm the chair of IFIP Technical Committee 11. And something that's relevant to something I'm going to draw upon at certain points in this presentation, I was a contributor to a cybersecurity skills study that was done, well, last year and this year in the UK from our Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, so one of the government departments that's interested in this space. A number of research interests, and the one that's of most relevance in the context of this, it overlaps with this issue of security culture and awareness within our organizations, and having cybersecurity skills to support that is sort of rather fundamental. Okay, so to set the scene properly on the topic, I'm sure you're aware that over recent years, cybersecurity as a topic has become quite prominent, quite visible within the organization space. It's not that it was invisible in prior years, but it's even more acutely visible now and seen as a priority. But as I say in the second bullet here, everybody seems to say they want it, but do they really know what they want, how to characterize it? What do they recognize cybersecurity as including? And also, if they then need skills to support this provision, what do the qualifications and the certifications that are out there actually cover across the breadth of what cybersecurity could and maybe should include? And actually the topic can end up looking rather different depending on what perspective you're viewing it from and what we use as our reference point, as our guide to the topic. So we'll look at that and we'll give some examples to particularly illustrate the point and then show how that in its turn maps through to the presentation of qualifications. Okay, so there are various qualifications, various professional certifications that are available that our current workforce might have and that our future workforce, those looking to be employed in cybersecurity, could be pursuing. Are they all the same? Well, I'll spoil the surprise there. No, they're not. They're many and varied. And so given that, how can we tell the difference between these different things that are on offer? All right, so first of all, I mentioned that there's a skills gap, and so let's start to evidence this a little bit. So a few slides with some information on this. First from Enterprise Strategy Group, going back to some data that they were last presented in this form back in 2019. So they, over the years, have looked at what organizations are facing in terms of skills shortages within their environments. And the topmost skill over the last few years that they did this survey, the one named most problematic was cybersecurity skills. Not only was it the top rated area of challenge, it was also a growing area, as you can see from the chart. So an increasing proportion of the respondents indicating that they've got a problematic shortage in that space. If we want something a little bit more widespread as a population, we've got ISC Squared's global sample for a cybersecurity workforce study. Again, this study's been done over successive years, so I'm drawing on the most recent version of the report here. So almost 2/3 of organizations reporting some form of skill shortage in relation to cybersecurity, 42% characterizing it as a slight shortage, and almost a quarter saying it's a significant shortage for them. And as a result, over half indicating that their organization was at moderate or extreme risk as a result of not having the skills that it needed. And to put a number to this shortage, the most recent survey suggests it's about 3.12 million globally, shortage of cybersecurity practitioners, which is at least a drop from what they estimated the year before. But whichever way you look at it, it's a big gap to fill. So that sort of raises the question, if we are looking for people, if we've got a skills gap and a lack of practitioners in our organizations, what sort of things are we actually looking for? So here are just some examples of job ads that I drew upon in the UK. And the thing that I'm trying to show here is the myriad different acronyms and post-nominal abbreviations there that you would see for some of the certifications that are on offer. So just looking at the first one, so CISP, CISM, CEH, just to name the first three certifications there. So we've got the Certified Information Security Practitioner, we've got Certified Information Security Manager, we've got Certified Ethical Hacker. And those three certifications in themselves are not the same thing. So for that particular role, Cybersecurity Engineer, for those three certifications to be listed as being suitable, well, they're not all denoting the same skill set, they're not denoting the same level of experience. And so if somebody was to hire somebody with a CEH versus somebody with a CISP versus somebody with a CISM, well, they might not be getting the same thing for their money, so to speak. And it goes on as you look through that list of different roles. And you can see there's some quite interesting salaries available for those that have got the numbers associated with them. And we'll come back to this point later on once we've had a little bit more of a look at some of the detail. So who are we looking for? So certainly, yeah, okay, organizations need somebody to handle their cybersecurity needs. If you have a cybersecurity requirement, which most organizations will have, you need some sort of practitioner to deal with it. And I've got this picture of a unicorn on the side, which we'll return to later, perhaps as part of the discussion. But the key thing here is trying to point out that some of the requirements that people are looking for are perhaps unrealistic to find within a single person. So you're looking for this mythical practitioner that might not actually exist in reality, and it's where some of those previous job adverts were perhaps pointing. Now, those that we're looking to hire to provide the support, they need to understand the relevant parts of the topic, so they need to have cybersecurity knowledge, but they also need to have practical skills to put into practice what's needed to handle the protection. So as potential employers in the area, how do we know what's relevant? As potential employees, how do we know what's relevant to pursue to advance ourselves appropriately? How do we recognize the skills, and also where do we find, as employers in particular, the people that have got the skills we've now decided we want? So all of these are challenging questions, and we'll begin to unpack some of them as we go through. But I suppose it brings up the question of, well, what is cybersecurity anyway? And so, yeah, it's very easy to say cybersecurity is all about protecting systems, data, etc., etc. But what does that include if you break it down into some of the underlying subtopics? And I've said here it's a multi-faith community of practitioners. What I'm trying to draw out here is what the subsequent point are highlighting, that there's a range of topics. Some of them are technical, and they're perhaps the things that we tend to recognize more immediately, quite often in the way that it gets presented to us, and I'll evidence that as we go. But there's also non-technical topics, the human aspects, legal aspects, the physical protection of physical environment needs consideration. And as I say, perhaps often a skew towards the technical aspect. So, looking at some data from this survey from the UK Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS, conducted by a company called Ipsos Mori and published earlier this year, it's drawing upon respondents from UK organisations, looking at the skills in this particular case that they claim to lack confidence in. So if we look at how the survey grouped it here, into a set of technically oriented tasks, governance tasks, and communication related tasks in cybersecurity. It's interesting to see the proportion of respondents saying they lack confidence in their organization's ability to handle different categories of things. So if we look at the technical tasks, the thing that they're least confident in, so the largest proportion saying not confident, is penetration testing. Okay, so a quarter of organizations doubting their abilities to handle that particular task. But if we look at the governance tasks, the things, the overarching things that ought to be protecting the organization as a business, as an organization, well, carrying out a cybersecurity risk assessment, almost half of the organizations lack confidence in their ability to facilitate that. And you'd imagine actually that ought to be one of the more fundamental things for an organization to be able to do before it starts thinking about its technical controls and the skills there, because it ought to have an understanding of where it's at risk, what are the threats, where are the vulnerabilities. And similarly, if we look at communication related tasks, okay, the vast majority do feel confident in the ability to give password guidance. So only 7% not confident there. But in terms of preparing training materials or training sessions for the staff within the organization, those people that you want to be security aware and behave in a compliant manner, well, there's a significant lack of confidence there. So if we look at these sort of in aggregation and compare them together, the biggest area of lack of confidence is around governance, then communication, then the technical aspect. So there's a lack of confidence to some degree in all of them, but it's more pronounced in the non-technical areas, as it turns out. And perhaps that relates to how some of this is presented in terms of the way security as a topic is presented in education and in industry certifications, as we'll come to see. So looking at where the demand actually is and the skills that the profession says that the practitioners ought to have. Here, again from the UK, the InfoSec Institute back in 2018 listed 10 areas of top, as they called them, top 10 skills security professionals need to have. And if we look at the top 5, okay, they're fairly well framed around technical aspects of security, most generally there. But looking further down the list, we get into things that actually aren't security specific at all. So customer service, communication, the ability to collaborate, all of these are much more team, personal, interpersonal, soft skills in some of the cases. So it's not just a case that we need security specific skills, we need those business skills in order to actually take the security aspects and enact them in an organizational environment. And again, ramming this point home a little bit further, another study from ISC² back in 2018, talking about hiring and retaining cybersecurity talent, the things that their respondents said were the most important skills or the most commonly used skills by them as respondents were around strategy, around management, user education, and risk assessment. And then security operations, I guess, is the only one of those that perhaps springs out as more technically oriented. Now, as the footnote there at the bottom says, this particular sample was likely skewed by who they were asking because they were senior level respondents, so 2/3 of them in middle management or higher roles. So okay, perhaps they've moved past technical skills being part of their day-to-day diet of activities. So perhaps the technical skills are more prominent, more dominant at the lower level roles within cybersecurity. And then as you advance, you're progressing more into the need for these softer, non-technical aspects. So am I trying to promote a message here that non-technical skills are actually the most important or more important than technical? No, I'm not. The key point is that all of it is part of the picture that an organization needs to recognize, and somehow it needs to facilitate these. We require this holistic view of cybersecurity as a topic. And actually, the way it can be presented is quite different depending on where you look. And so as a practitioner, what you may be perceiving cybersecurity to be, what you understand it to be about, might be quite influenced by how you've learned about it, what you use as your main frame of reference, particularly if you were focused around one particular source of reference as your guide to the understanding of it. So what I want to do now is look at some different security frameworks and evidence this point that they actually cut the domain up quite differently. So as one example, this is something that you may have come across. Certainly in the UK, this is getting promoted quite significantly because it's something that was sponsored in terms of work by our National Cybersecurity Centre here in the UK. It's the creation of something they call the Cybersecurity Body of Knowledge, or CYBOC for short. And this was first published in full in October, I think it was, of 2019. And at the time was breaking the topic area up into 19 knowledge areas as listed here on the slide. So this is a bit of a moving target, or a moving feast, in the sense that there are more knowledge areas being released and some of these existing ones are being revised. But what we can see here is how the initial release of CYBOC cut up the topic area. So we've got a range of things. The first one there, risk management and governance, feels quite non-technical, quite business focused, but the one at the bottom of that particular column, malware, and the one at the bottom of the next column, forensics, feel more technically oriented. So we'll look at this a little bit further as we go. But just as a contrast, looking at something else that's been around for actually quite some time, the most recent release, I think, still is 2013, but you can track this particular standard all the way back to the mid-90s, is the ISO International Code of Practice for security controls, as they now call it. It's had a few name changes, was Code of Practice for Security Management up to this particular release. But this one cuts the topic area into 14 different topics. And again, looking at this list, we begin to see things that are actually more business and organizationally focused than perhaps the way that CYBOC was presenting things. Underneath all of this, there's 114 different specific controls, but these 14 areas, these 14 clauses, is how they, at the top level, cut security up and group the controls together. So if we try and put this into some sort of color-coded chart and also compare it with a few other potential reference points. So firstly, let's go across the top and explain what these things are. So we've got the ISC squared common body of knowledge. So this is the knowledge base that underpins CISP and other professional certifications from ISC squared. So they're one of the leading certification providers. We've got the skills framework from Seaset, the Chartered Institute of Information Security, that I'm a board member of in the UK, which is a common frame of reference, certainly amongst corporate organisations in the UK. We've got the CSEC 2017 curricular guidance, which was produced by a combination of the ACM, AIS, IEEE and IFIP back in 2017. We've got CYBOC that I've mentioned. We've got ISO 27002, which I've mentioned, the NICE workforce framework, and the NSA's cyber or Centres of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity. And all of these have got some way of cutting up the topic area, grouping cybersecurity or information security into top level groupings. And we've seen the way in particular that CYBOC in 27002 did it. And all of the others have some sort of categorization. Now, I've not shown the specific topics of the others, but what I have done is attempted to color code whether the topics that they present are predominantly or fully non-technical, a mix of technical and non-technical topics, such that you wouldn't say they're specifically one or the other, fully or predominantly technical, or even not specifically cybersecurity related. So there's only one bit within that that's color-coded there in red. That's from the CISEC skills framework, where there's a skills group about management, leadership and communication aspect, which is more that fitting into the business part of things. But in the case of the others, you can see, using my highly scientific color coding here, that it's quite a mixed picture. So looking at the two that we'd already seen the list of topics for, CYBOC and ISO 27002, you can see that the balance in those two cases is indeed quite different. So CYBOC, the topics that it headlines are predominantly technical, and in 27002, they're predominantly non-technical. So let's just look under the surface again and see how I did the color coding for those particular pair of them. So that's, again, using the same color coding scheme, that's how I grouped the topics. So the first few CYBOC things are non-technical topics in the way that CYBOC, when you look at the document, is presenting them. But the majority are technical, and 27,002, it's almost the reverse situation. And they're not the same list of topics in the first place either. You've got 19 versus 14, apart from anything else, to make it quite clear that there's a difference in the way things have been grouped. So again, these two things are, and all of the others, are potential reference points that people could be using. So just going back to the slide there, so CSEC, the CSEC 2017 curricular guidance, that specifically exists to guide universities in providing undergraduate curricula in cybersecurity. So it is skewed somewhat towards the technical coverage, we could see from that. So moving ourselves along. So what do the frameworks offer? They're a point of reference for us to map other things against. So we can map courses, we can map professional certifications and training. And in some cases, that's specifically what they've been provided to do. So I say the CSEC 2017 guidance, it's specifically created to be our guide to creating academic programs, so degrees for undergraduate courses. The ISC squared common body of knowledge, well, that's specifically there as a reference for ISC squared's own set of certifications, so CISP, SSCP, and various others. The other frameworks, things like CYBOC, they've got a more general purpose, but you can still use them in this context. So a paper by Hallett et al. Called Mirror Mirror is specifically comparing other security frameworks against CYBOC to show the varying degrees of mapping. So again, it's not that any of them have got the right answer, but what they've got is different views on the topic. And so if you're guided by one of them in particular, you're going to get a different potential outcome to what you would get with one of the others. Okay, so I've said some of that anyway. It's not that any of them are right or wrong, but you need to be clear on what your purpose is in using them. So going back to, and we'll return to some of this in a second, but going back to the needs of employers and what they're expecting, or this issue of technical versus non-technical. So a quote, an interesting quote from ISACA's State of Cybersecurity survey, going back in 2019. Currently, the most prized hire in a team is a technically proficient individual who also understands business operations and the needs of the enterprise, how cybersecurity fits into that. And similarly, Symantec, from another study in the same year, the really good people are far more than just technically skilled. Especially in the higher ranks, you'll have that mix of technical and soft skills. And the key point there, which enables them to implement frameworks that really work because they understand what they're trying to implement and what they're trying to fit it into. So, all right, all very well, things are different. How does that relate to, for example, how we teach cybersecurity in universities? So what I've got on the next couple of slides is some examples from the UK and also from the US. In each case, 10 MSc programs, depicting them in the same way that I depicted the frameworks and color coding them in the same way. The interesting, I think it's interesting thing here is that all of them are marketed with the same title. They're all called MSc Cybersecurity. So it's not MSc Cybersecurity and penetration testing or and digital forensics or anything like that. They're all called exactly the same thing. And what we did here, and this is drawn upon in a couple of papers that I'll highlight towards the end, we looked at what the publicly available syllabi for these programs was saying and looked at the topics that were therefore represented under the surface of this heading. Now, I've not got the detail presented on the next couple of slides, but what I do have is the color-coded result, and it shows you quite a difference in the balance. So here's 10 UK cybersecurity programs. And I suppose the one that always jumps out to me is program number 5 here, which is a program that has 50% of its coverage is about cybersecurity. So you've got modules with cybersecurity in the title, or cybersecurity issues in the title. So digital forensics, malware analysis, secure development, things like that. The other 50% is not cybersecurity specific. So it might be a general module on software engineering or networking or databases or something like this. So, okay, there could well be relevance to cybersecurity within that. There could even be some cybersecurity coverage embedded within it, but the module, the unit concerned is not about cybersecurity. Nonetheless, the program is selling itself as a cybersecurity specific program. And I suppose it's in stark contrast to some of the others. Program 4, for example, there you've got a very technically oriented casting of MSc cybersecurity. Program 10, you've got actually the balance skewed towards non-technical coverage. So key thing is, again, it's not that any of them has particularly got it right or got it wrong, but they're all selling by name the same thing, but what they're selling is quite a different thing. So as a potential applicant to one of those programs or an employer of a graduate from one of those programs, you really would need to look below the surface of that heading to see what you're actually getting. And it's just, well, a similar overall picture, but different individual results for 10 programs that we sampled from the US. So again, quite a varied range of balances across the picture of the programs. And what I should say is in the US and the UK cases, we were sampling from different types of university. It wasn't all from, let's say, research intensive universities or anything like that. We were trying to get a suitable sample geographically and in terms of nature of organization. But the key thing was they're all selling the same program title. So, okay, certainly when you look at the coverage of red areas, the non-cybersecurity coverage, certainly having coverage of those wider topics is going to be relevant. Having knowledge of beyond just cybersecurity is relevant for a cybersecurity practitioner, for a professional, because, yeah, okay, you're going to be applying cybersecurity within those contexts and relating to those technologies and implementations. But having half of your program devoted to covering those topics rather than something that's specifically about cybersecurity perhaps seems excessive if you're presenting a one-year postgraduate program that's named cybersecurity, and perhaps it's not what the employers would be expecting to get as a result. So, okay, what does that mean? It means you can't, perhaps we knew this anyway, you can't just, or you ought not to just judge the book by its cover. You need to understand a bit more about what you're going to get. And again, using a UK reference point here, we have so-called certified degrees from our National Cybersecurity Centre. So you've got a degree certification scheme for undergraduate programs and for masters, for ones that specialize in cybersecurity, for ones that have some cybersecurity content but broader computing coverage. Well, all of the programs that I've just presented would be ones that would be expecting to be certified as general masters in cybersecurity. But again, they would map to this certification in very different ways. So what do employers actually want? Actually looking at this list again from, well, a version of the ISC Squared's workforce study, this one from a couple of years ago, because the most recent versions of the study don't actually present this particular result. But back in 2018, well, actually undergraduate and postgraduate degrees, they're the least valued according to the respondents in this particular case. Doesn't mean, of course, that they have no value, but they're perceived to be less important than, top of the list, unsurprisingly, relevant work experience. And then further, not too far down the list, cybersecurity certifications. So having the industry professional practitioner certifications, things like CISP and CISM and CH, those sort of things. And perhaps part of the reason for that is some of those certifications, holding them is perhaps a proxy for indicating that you've got practitioner experience, because some of them you can't get the certification unless you've been in practice for a certain amount of time, as we shall see. Okay, so employers, certainly they're not looking at academic degrees as their primary focus. So wherever these different things fit in together at our different levels of what they might be providing to us, our different levels of focus on coverage and specialization. So a rough guide to it would be something like this. So our academic qualifications at the top of the diagram here, not to suggest that they're better because they're at the top, they're just different from what's at the bottom, but they've got a fairly broad focus, whereas something at the bottom, like one of our more vendor or technology specific certifications, like a Cisco cybersecurity specialist, is going to have quite a narrow focus in terms of its content, perhaps down to a particular product type. Whereas the skills that we're going to get from our academic qualifications, well, they're going to be a balance of perhaps general and theoretical. Not to say there's no practical skills, and not to say there's no theory in the things at the bottom of the diagram, but the balance would be expected to change. You would expect an academic qualification to be talking about the wider context in which things fit in, not just doing hands-on practical activities. Although, again, from the employer perspective, that sometimes does seem to be what they want, expect, and often why academic qualifications tend to get criticized, because the graduates aren't necessarily walking out proficient practically in all of the technologies that employers would like them to be. And that's where some of the certifications come in, and of course, actual professional development and experience. So, okay, quick points to note before we move on. Of course, cybersecurity knowledge and skills can be embedded within wider qualifications. You don't just, for example, have to take an academic degree that has cybersecurity in the name. You would hope and expect to find some coverage of the topic within wider computing and computer science, for example, and similarly within wider certification. So a networking certification might still be expected to cover some aspects of network security within it. And similarly, the recognition of cybersecurity as a specialism, as a particular sector within our industry, doesn't mean that everything that relates to cybersecurity has to be done by a cybersecurity specific role. We would expect people in other roles to also have knowledge, awareness, and responsibility for cybersecurity aspects relevant to their roles as well. So this isn't meant to suggest that there's an exclusive path here, but just to set the context, we will carry on a more cyber-specific focus in this talk. So I've actually mentioned some of the acronyms on the slide here. We've got numerous certifications that are out there, numerous providers of them. I've listed a few of the names that are more commonly encountered within the sector and that you may be aware of. And again, even amongst the few acronyms I've listed here, there's different topic coverage, different prerequisites in terms of experience to take and obtain the certification, and different ways in which they're assessed and examined in order for you to gain it. So it's worth looking a little bit further at some of these distinctions. So just taking 3 touch points, our academic qualification as one example. So if we think about what you need in order to do that, so a candidate needs to have typically some sort of qualifications for them to gain entry into a university program. Then they will study for however many years it is, depending on whether it's undergraduate or graduate program. And they will be assessed by completing assessments generally the university itself has designed. And different universities will assess different or the same topic via different assessments. So it's not a completely homogenized approach. Something like Security Plus, this is an example of a general but entry level certification in security. So somebody taking this doesn't need to have any prior experience as a practitioner, and the way they're assessed ultimately after they've studied for it, it's a 90-minute exam based on multiple choice type questions in this particular case. And then there's CISP, our Certified Information System Security Professional certification, one of the more widely recognized ones in terms of adverts and things for roles. Here, candidates need to have 5 years cumulative paid full-time work experience in order to be able to get the certification. And that experience needs to cover at least 2 of the 8 topic domains within this common body of knowledge that ISC Squared has defined to support its certifications. Now, of course, what that actually means is somebody will have, if you see 2 people with CISP after their name, they've got those post-nominal letters, what you will know is, okay, that person has passed the CISP exam, And the exam for CISP is something like 4 to 5 hours, quite a lot of questions within it. And they'll also have got 5 years work experience in cybersecurity doing something that maps to the CISP CBK. But you won't know what domains their experience exists within without looking a little bit further, looking at their resume, looking at their CV to understand, well, what do they have experience in? Just seeing the post-nominals doesn't tell you the detail of where their experience lies. Okay, so just to give us a little bit more of a sense of some of the certifications that are around, here's just a few acronyms. Well, pretty much all of those are genuine. There's one there that perhaps isn't a genuine acronym. Now, if we had time, and particularly if we were in a room together, I'd say to you, I'd give $20 to anybody who could actually tell me what all of those acronyms stand for, because I couldn't tell you what they all stand for without looking them up. And I think what that creates is a situation where we are potentially quite confused. So particularly if you think of an employer that is looking to recruit somebody, how do they understand, unless they're specifically knowing already what they're looking for? If they're presented with somebody who's got 4 or 5 of these acronyms after their name as post-nominals, how do they navigate their way through to finding what they need? And if you want to look at this in a bit more detail, there's a really good resource here at Paul Jeremy's site there, and I'll leave that up there just for a moment so you can screenshot it, take photographs or whatever. But this basically chart is an interactive roadmap when you go to the site, and you can hover over the different certifications and see what they are and the requirements that they have. You can see, well, you might be able to see if your eyesight is good, that they've been color coded and grouped into different aspects of security specialization there across the top. And then you've got multiple different certifications, some of them that are very security specific, and some of them where security is an element of the certification but not the full focus. So you've got things like Cisco CCNA buried in amongst various other things as well. So quite an interesting resource if you want to explore it more fully. Okay, now having pointed out that you've got all these different types of certification, let's go back to an example of one of these job ads. So here we have an earlier job ad for an infrastructure security manager. They're going to pay £80,000, which is not a bad salary in the UK. Many people would love that sort of salary. And what do they want? Well, they bachelor's degree, they'd like a master's degree, they'd like a certification, and the certifications they list. They list CEH, the Certified Ethical Hacker, which is one a little bit like Security Plus. You don't need to have any prior experience, and you just need to pass an exam to get this certification. And it's focused, as the name suggests, on ethical hacking. So it's that sort of focus. CISP, Certified Information Systems Security Professional, broad brush certification. 5 years of experience required to get that one. CISM, Certified Information Security Manager, again, about 5 years experience required, focusing on security management activities. So 3 different things. And GIAC, the Global Information Assurance Certification. Well, actually, GIAC is a scheme. There's about 50 certifications that sit within that. So you can have GIAC certified penetration tester, GIAC certified intrusion analyst, lots of different specializations. So those 4 things or equivalent. So 4 things that aren't remotely similar or equivalent would be what they would like. So perhaps suggesting that the advert, those putting it together, don't have a particularly specifically clear idea about what they'd like. They would just like something, is the message you get from that. I'll have £80,000 on that basis. Okay, so that's highlighting what I've just tried to draw out. So where does the demand sit? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the clear demand in most places that you look is for CISP. But in this drawing upon Enterprise Strategy Group that we looked at earlier, you can see here that CISP is the one by far and away ahead of the others. So the others are, well, if we look at these ones, we've got CISM, the Security Manager one, the what is it, Security Architect, CESA, Certified Information Security Architect, if I remember correctly. No, Systems Auditor, what am I talking about? Use my brain. Certified Information Systems Auditor. Security Plus, which is the entry level thing, and CH, Ethical Hacker, which is again an entry-level certification. So the entry-level ones, less demand for them. The more specialized auditor and security manager one, less specific demand for them because they're more focused. CISP, because it's that generalist certification that has an indication, or it is the proxy for saying somebody's got 5 years experience in doing something. That is one of the reasons I think this one comes out as quite a popular certification. Now, that's all very well. Lots of people would like CISP, but in terms of supply in the market, well, there's less of those people around. And this is something that I put together based on some data that was on the cybersecurity.org website, well, probably about a year and a half ago when I actually did this. So if you look now, you'll see some different data, I'd imagine. But I put this chart together based on what I saw at the time, but I'm sure the overall picture won't be too different now. And the ones I wanted to draw attention to were the orange diamondy shape at the top there for CISP and the red square for Security Plus. So what we can see is there's quite a high supply of people that hold Security Plus certification, but there is relatively little demand for it compared to CISP, where there's high demand but fewer people actually holding it. And so there's an imbalance in terms of what actually exists out there, which helps to explain part of this skills gap, or at least the gap in filling the roles, because there isn't enough of the sort of people that industry would ideally think it likes to have. And then we've got the relationship between these things. So how do we understand how these things fit together? So, okay, we've got skills that support the notion of having certifications. The certifications then denote certain skills are being held. In terms of the roles that we want to hire people into, well, having skills enables us to do the roles. Roles require certain skills. And the dotted line is indicating, well, what we're actually using as employers quite often is the certification as our means of understanding, does the certification holder have the skills that we would need to support the roles we're trying to hire into? Okay, so the certifications enable roles potentially, and the roles potentially require certifications. What it's really about is the skills, and the certification is our proxy again. So, trying to draw this waffle to a bit of a close, what it is important to recognize is that this topic has a breadth of skills being needed, and we need to ensure as organizations that we cover off the bases that are relevant to us. A natural way to do it is to look for the suitable certifications or qualifications that we think denote what we need. But if that's to work, we need to understand what these certifications represent. We need to understand what the qualifications have actually covered. We need to have some sort of more granular understanding rather than just looking perhaps at the label. If we have a siloed approach to cybersecurity, if we focus too much effort in just the technical or even just the non-technical, although the latter is less likely to happen, we'll be actually limiting the protection we can achieve. What we want is this range of skills to be represented, either internally or brought in if we can't sustain them ourselves within the organization, and working together to provide the coverage that we require. But even when we've understood the problem, actually finding the people who've got the skills that we need could still be a challenge. But at least having a realistic understanding of what we're looking for will be a good starting point. So I think where organizations are continually looking for people who've got the magical 3 to 5 years practitioner skills, well, if there aren't enough of those people around, have a relevant understanding of what a less experienced person could be hired in with and how you could support them to grow the skills will be a relevant thought in mind. Okay, a few references for some of the things I've drawn upon. So this UK labour market study is where I got that different measures of confidence from the organisation in technical, governance and communication skills, amongst other things. There's about 85 pages in this particular study, so a lot of interesting information within it. And as you might see on the document there, it's one that I helped to contribute to. And another couple of things from, well, not only myself, but also Matt Bishop from UC Davis. We did a couple of papers looking at these issues, and that's where those coloured charts with the comparing the security frameworks and comparing the qualifications, the MSc programs in the UK and the US came from. So there's this one in computer fraud and security, and this one from the World Conference on Security Education last year. And one final thing, just to wave the flag, particularly for SPAF's journal, Computers and Security. Here's a briefing paper that we published from IFIP TC11 talking about this particular issue, and Computers and Security are kind enough to publish these TC11 briefing papers. So that's a good place to look, and that one's freely available for you online. And other than that, that's me finally finished talking. Contact details there, and happy to have a go answering any questions, assuming the connection has actually held up and you're still there.
We are still here.
Excellent.
Do you have the Q&A icon in your bottom menu bar there?
Yeah, so I've got the Q&A thing. So I've got, okay, so I've got one question I can see, which is, how do we repair the damage caused by CISPs or the people who crack the test without an in-depth understanding of the core principles? So what do we mean by the damage caused by CISPs? Can perhaps the questioner elaborate upon that? Is the question there?
Krasimir, can you unmute and add to that? Ah, well.
Yes, security is preventing them. They don't have permission.
Censorship. So yes, what I mean is the following. Very often we have people that have CIS, comma CISSP behind their name because they cannot pin a PhD, for example, or anything else meaningful. And those are the people that come in a company as a consultant and cause a lot of damage by basically speaking out of authority and recommending things that are just not appropriate. Now, I have been a consultant for many years. I have been in industry for over 20 years, all kinds of different levels. And this pattern is consistent. Actually, I have learned to trust people that don't put the CISSP in their title, and you can see them somewhere at the very bottom in like additional miscellaneous facts. You know, those are the people I normally trust, but the ones that have CISSP in the title appear to be particularly dangerous.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to assume that everyone who chooses to list CISP as a post-nominal is implicitly untrustworthy, but equally, I don't think the mere presence of that after somebody's name is a signifier of anything other than you can assume from that, as I mentioned, they passed the exam, so they've got some broad knowledge of security principles that the CISP syllabus taught them, and they got some practitioner experience of something. What it doesn't confirm in any sense is that they are a professional security practitioner. So holding any certification or any qualification doesn't denote a professional approach. It doesn't denote competence. So you might well have the knowledge, you might well have the skills, but it doesn't prove that you can enact those in a competent and professional manner. That's not to, in any sense, denigrate CISP holders and say that they are unprofessional by default either. But what it means is you shouldn't be assuming just from that something that it's not actually telling you. So I think it is better, okay, you want to hire somebody in as a consultant, look at their track record. Where have they consulted before? Do they have recommendations from the previous employers, so to speak, the previous people they came in for, and did they do a good job? Don't just assume that because they're waving a flag to say they've got a CISP that that is fit for purpose.
Oh yeah, I do agree with you with what you're saying. What I'm saying is that there's, at least in my experience, the people that wave it behind their name usually are the ones that are the problem. And for me, maybe I'm more conservative, but for me, it's just inappropriate to have those, something that takes a 4-hour exam and like really not much experience, because in most cases they don't even validate the experience, and also could be, is it 5 years of experience or is it the same year repeated 5 times, right? You know, I personally see things like you know, advanced degrees where you have to go through the rigor of multiple different, you know, subjects. You have to perform consistently throughout different disciplines, and then you can put a degree behind your name, you know, and a title. I don't know. I kind of think that as an industry we have a problem when we start devaluing education and putting craftsmanship level exams as a title in the name. How do we deal with that?
But well, I think you're right. I think it is a question still of it's understanding what each thing actually represents and understanding how that matches to our needs. So again, with CISP, as you say, it's somebody's passed an exam and they've got at least what it says on the tin, 5 years of practitioner experience in something. And yeah, almost the onus is on us then to sort of look further and say, well, what is the practitioner experience in? What does their CV, their resume tell us as the story? I mean, I agree with you. Obviously, I'm going to agree with you in terms of valuing academic education, but equally, you will get those concerns expressed by employers. Certainly, it's a common story here in the UK, criticising computing graduates as coming out of universities not holding the skills, the experience that the employer would like to assume they're going to have. And you know, I would agree with you that they're going to have that broader knowledge base to draw upon, a wider range of experiences. It's not just about their hands-on technical and immediate deployability. They are positioned to do something further, and they will need, you know, typically a combination of these things to actually position them as an effective practitioner. I mean, I suppose, you know, in summary, a lot of what I'm saying here is it's not just any one of these things. And even if, you know, you look at them, they're purely indicators. The onus is on us to understand our needs more fully and to try and have a basis to do that mapping of, okay, here's a set of potential practitioners, here are our needs, how do the things gel together?
Yeah, and if I hear you correctly, basically it's about educating the employers to understand what they're getting behind that label. And again, that's kind of my question, is how do we actually educate employers for them to be more cognizant of that? But I didn't mean to like dig in a hole there. So
I mean, it's enabling the employers, because again, we're not expecting all of them to be cybersecurity experts in order to hire a cybersecurity expert. But what we need to have is perhaps more clear specifications of different roles to indicate, okay, you want this particular aspect of security done, you need this sort of role, it needs to have these sort of skills. And this is the sort of thing that is beginning to emerge in terms of things like the NICE workforce framework. We've got in the UK a new UK Cybersecurity Council, which is looking at specifying career pathways and the knowledge and skills that help to support roles at different levels within those.
now, what do you think? And I just want an add-on question. I apologize, but what do you think about maybe? And I personally have mixed opinion on this, but in order to at least make the playing field level for our graduates, if we implement maybe specialized trainings in the last year of their curriculum, where we can maybe facilitate them in passing some of those exams, because even for the CASSP, even if it's a bachelor's degree, they can become at least a CASSP associate and be competitive on the job market as a result, because I really feel like people that put a lot of effort in studying and having consistent education are not treated well just because somebody that has a little bit of craftsmanship skill that just happens to know this open source project or this open source project has an edge.
Yeah, so I've got mixed feelings about it, I suppose. I would be quite happy to advocate it, integrating it, if you can integrate it without compromising something else that you wanted to cover or you actually feel would be better to cover as part of the degree program you're trying to offer. And you know, again, if let's say for the sake of argument, you integrate CEH into your program, or you integrate the exam component, the knowledge component of CISP, is that the right thing for all of the graduates who will then emerge. There'll doubtless be some that still emerge, and no, actually that wasn't the certification that this particular employer would have liked them to have, or this employer would have preferred them to have a more rounded academic education. So you're never going to satisfy everybody, no matter what you do. And so it could be a selling point. It could be something that differentiates one academic degree from another. We've got this certification embedded, we've got that one, but you still need to think as a candidate then on that program, is that the certification that's going to be useful for the career that I want?
This is a longer issue of philosophy of what a degree is, and we have this here, the range between a liberal arts degree and a purely technical degree, and as a conversation that hasn't been resolved in any meaningful way yet, but that would be topic for another time. I don't see any other questions that have shown up. So thank you so much, Steve. It's a great way to tie up the end of the semester for us. We appreciate it a great deal, and we look forward to maybe having you visit sometime.
I would really enjoy that. Thank you very much again for the opportunity. Sorry about the network connectivity issues at the start. Hopefully we got most of it. And great to be part of it. Thank you.
I think we did get it, so thank you. And everyone, good luck with your finals, and hope to see you at the, for those of you who are taking them, and hope to see you at the summer session.